welcome you to our final webinar of the year, hosted by St. Luke's of Oviedo, Florida. Invite an author, create a reader. John and Anita Glanzer are going to be our hosts this afternoon. St. Luke's Schools Literacy Festival is an annual highlight for students, teachers, and parents. Festival features a notable children's literature author and many well-defined activities result in students growing in their love for reading and books. Great, anxious to hear all about it. Let's begin with a word of prayer first. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather in this webinar to learn more about special best practices from St. Luke's. We ask that you would bless our presentation, bless all within schools as they continue to share your word. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, John and Anita, we'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Welcome to Invite an Author, Create a Reader. Good afternoon. My name is Anita Glanzer, and I'm here with my husband, John. I'm currently teaching first grade, and John is teaching 8th grade here at St. Luke's Lutheran School in Oviedo, Florida. Previously, we taught at Grace Lutheran School in Sandy, Utah. We are excited to be a part of the school ministry here at St. Luke's, and it's a privilege to share with you how our school encourages literacy among our students and families through the Splash Literacy Festival.
In today's webinar, we will share why and how we started a literacy festival, the goals that we had for our festival, the benefits of having a literacy festival, how we choose the authors we invite to our festival, what a day with an author looks like, and allow some time for questions.
As readers and writers, we know that all good stories have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. So I'd like to launch our webinar today by starting at the beginning of our story, our Literacy Festival journey, and sharing how our dream of hosting a literacy festival came to be a reality. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, there lived a young couple. They were both teachers at a Lutheran school in the land of Zion, known to the non-Mormon population as Utah. Both teachers had an interest in reading and loved books. They wanted their students to develop that same love and enjoyment from reading, but they found it challenging and downright difficult to get the kids to even read. There were video games, school sports activities, comp teams, dance and gymnastics, piano lessons, NBA and MLS sports teams, favorite TV shows, scouts and brownie, family activities, and friends. And for a majority of our kids, there didn't seem to be much interest or time left over in their schedules for reading. The teachers didn't give up hope, though, and continued to ponder how they might inspire their students to become readers and writers. Things changed one summer when they made the trek to Nebraska and started grad school. Concordia University in Seward offered a master's in education degree with a reading emphasis, so the second grade teacher eagerly enrolled and started taking classes. It was during their summers at Seward that she came to learn about the Plum Creek Literacy Festival. It was started by one of the literacy professors, Janelle Uffelman. The more she learned about the Plum Creek Literacy Festival, the more intrigued she became. Students in Seward and Lincoln schools, public and parochial, got to spend a whole day hearing and seeing different nationally known authors and illustrators. Laura Joffe Numeroff, Stephen Kellogg, Lois Lowry, Richard Peck, Andrew Clements, Mo Willems, Judy Schachner, and the list goes on and on. After the presentations, they could meet the author up close and have their books signed. The next day, students from surrounding towns were invited to come and meet these authors and illustrators and attend their sessions. Then on Saturday, teachers could come and attend presentations and workshops by the authors. They had an author luncheon and a book signing time as well. She was amazed how many authors and illustrators were invited each year. She came away inspired and, quite honestly, a bit jealous. She wished that she could have had this opportunity as a child. She left that summer thinking her students in Utah should have the same opportunity. So she met with Professor Uffelman, who graciously gave her some pointers about how to get started. It was also helpful to fly back 2 years later and attend the Saturday event at the Plum Creek Literacy Festival. Vicki Grimmel, the coordinator, was also gracious enough to allow her to experience sessions with the authors. With the taste of the festival under her belt, she became even more determined to make this a reality for the students at Grace. At this point, the storybook beginning became a reality, and we began our first festival at our school. I knew I would need to raise funds, so I went home and brainstormed. I like to run. Utah was a great place for 5K races, etc. What about hosting a race and raise funds that way? So that's exactly what I did. I started the Grace Dash and Pasta Bash, a 5K race with a pasta supper the night before. I wanted to make sure that we had an extra cushion from year to year, so we fundraised for 2 years before we hosted the first festival. I had a lofty goal, and my dream was to bring in 3 authors and illustrators the first year. I wanted someone who could work with our preschool through 2nd grade students, our students in grades 3 through 5, and then our middle school students. Plum Creek brings in hundreds of students to their author presentations, and the presentations are held in large rooms, the church, gym, etc. But I wanted our students to have an intimate, up-close experience with an author, or even 2. We made between $3 and $4 grand each race after expenses. At the time, Thrivent was also encouraging groups to get community members involved, so we were able to secure matching funds through them. Members of our school also had access to a restaurant, so we partnered with them for the meal portion. The first year we had the Grace Dash and Barbecue Bash, and then it switched to pasta. John and I would solicit donations during the summer, so we had a great prize giveaway at the end of the race. We were also fortunate enough that members of the school and congregation supported our festival through private donations. After we accepted the call to Florida, our committee members in Utah decided that running the 5K was not for them, so they organized Lanes for Literacy. One of the family's parents owned a bowling alley. They were generous enough to allow the school families to use their facilities, so the families would bowl and raise money for the author visits that way. As you think about securing sources of funding, be creative and utilize your family connections. Once we moved to Florida, one of the things St. Luke's was excited about was the possibility of starting a festival here. St. Luke's was hosting the Principals of Large Lutheran Schools Conference in January, so our principal at the time, Mr. Leopold, asked if we could possibly have an author visit and tie the visit in with the Principals Conference. If they would get excited about the visit, then maybe they would bring an author to their school. We are blessed here at St. Luke's as our PTL funds the festival each year. We submitted a 5-year budget for approval, and then we worked from there. We had 1 author the first year and have had 2 authors every year since. In 2014, we will have 3 authors visit our school.
Before we share what goals we had in mind when we developed the festival, let's take this opportunity to answer any questions you might have. And just a point here too, we're going to provide a packet with all sorts of information to basically set up your own literacy festival. Let's move on to the next section. As we consider starting a literacy festival, we wanted the festival to accomplish certain goals. One of the main goals we had was to increase the amount of reading and writing our students were doing. The Literacy Festival is a terrific avenue where students can learn firsthand about the reading and writing process from published authors. We felt it was important to give our students the opportunity to interact with nationally known authors and illustrators and provide a setting where students get to interact with authors up close in an intimate setting. When students attend small group workshops or writing sessions, they are more enthusiastic and open to receiving tips from authors about how to become better writers. We also wanted to expose the students to different genres. Once a person starts reading, they often find a genre they like, and then their reading tends to stay within those confines. Getting students to try new books and genres is always a challenge, as there's resistance to adults making suggestions to them. In students' minds, I think the encouragement we give them to try new books and authors is really suspect. I wonder how many students feel this way about it. Maybe students see teachers' suggestions for books something like this student's experience in these video segments.
Hey, kid, try this one. Oh, come on, don't be afraid. Don't run away. You'll like it, really. Try it, try it.
In my estimation, this dystopian novel portrays the antagonist as a rival unbidden by the typical moral conventions of the 21st century villain, enabling him to
the bottom line of your grade. If you act now, you can take advantage of the limited time offer of extra credit for those few customers who are proactively concerned about their GPA. Also, this book is made out of 100% recyclable components and was created at a 0% landfill-free manufacturing facility. If you read this book, you'll be making an ecologically responsible.
Although we did book talks with our students, to them there seemed to be a lack of authority behind our suggestions. But we found that when we suggested a book by an author we had met, it seemed to pique their interest. Now that same attempt to lure our students to book seemed far less of a struggle. By exposing kids to different genres at this age, we're hoping to build readers who read more broadly and are interested in numerous kinds of topics in writing. Reading is also such a great way to get kids to experience new worlds vicariously. They can go anywhere and do anything. What we discovered is that our students receive numerous benefits from the festival. Let's hear from a couple of those students now.
What do you like best about meeting these authors from the Literacy Festival?
I like best that when they come, you have all these questions after having read their novel, and that you like to, and when you don't have the author with you while you're reading the book, you can't ask questions. And when you actually can ask questions from the author, you get a much deeper, you can get a lot of more information from everything in the novel that happened than you thought from while reading it. You get a whole bigger overview. I mean, when we read Fly Girl with Cherie L. Smith, there was a whole different meaning that I never even thought of when she explained it to the book.
Which book do you like best?
Big Chickens.
And why did you like Big Chickens?
Because it's funny and they're always scared.
Okay. Are you ever scared?
So, yeah, but I'm only scared of one thing.
What are you scared of?
Dark.
The dark. All right. And what did you like best about meeting Mrs. Halikoski?
She raised everybody.
And which books do you think are funny?
Big Chickens is Miss Bushy Bus.
Yeah. Did you learn anything new when you heard Mrs. Halikoski? Did she tell you anything new? What did she tell you that was new? Or that you learned?
Oh, don't be a big chicken.
Don't be a big chicken? Yeah. What did you learn?
Well, she doesn't live here.
Right. Where did she live?
Washington.
Oh, okay. What do you remember about Stephen Kellogg last year?
Stephen Kellogg was awesome. He told us how he hid pictures in there and how good he hid the pictures in there. That was awesome.
How about you? What book did you like best of Mrs. Halikoski?
I like Wilbur.
Why did you like Wilbur?
Because it explains how it's okay to be different.
Yeah, and we can be different. God makes us all different anyhow, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And if the world was all the same, then it wouldn't be fun.
Right, very good. And what did you learn about Mrs. Halikoski and how hard it is to get published? What does she have to do when she writes her stories?
She has to change the words over and over and over, and finally she gets them right.
Very good.
The right words she wants to get them.
All right. Very good. And what did you like best about meeting the authors?
I like seeing what they drew and all the stuff that they did.
Any particular authors you remember?
I remember Ted Arnold from Fly Guy when I was really little.
So what do you remember about the authors?
I remember Ted Arnold, and he drew a bunch of like Fly Guy pictures, and it was really cool. Dylan Van Dronen is coming this year, and she wrote a lot of good books, and I read 2 of them, and they were really good.
All right. So what are some of the things you've learned from authors as you've listened to them?
Some things that I've learned from authors is to never give up on your dreams, and if you have a good idea, write it down, and it might come in handy someday.
I like Ted Arnold the best because I read some of his books growing up, and it was pretty neat to see the author that I used to read his books, come to our school and sign it books that we could keep for our own and hand down to our next generation. But the other authors, I like them too because they're books that would be more enjoyable to read. They're not kids' books, so you could keep them and read them more over again and have it autographed by them too.
Stu has a question here. He says, what time of the year do you hold the festival? We hold the festival in February or March, and part of that's because living in Florida, there are always people up north that want to get out of the cold, and so they're very willing to come to Florida in the wintertime. It also works really well with our school year. We used to tie it in with National Lutheran Schools Week when it was the first week of March, but it just is a kind of a period of the school year which there's some space in between all the other things that are going on.
It also gives the teachers time to work with their students and prepare them for the author visits when you host it a little later in the year.
Here are some other ways that the Literacy Festival has enriched the lives of our students. By interacting with authors, it helps students see the importance of following the writing process and the steps that are needed. Students also have an opportunity to discuss what they're reading and connect with their reading with their writing. Another fantastic benefit is that the Literacy Festival has generated renewed enthusiasm for reading among our students. While we were in Utah, the amount of reading and writing that our students engaged in increased exponentially. Books by the author were constantly being checked out. An example of this enthusiasm can be seen on the 8th grade DC trip. While I was leading the trip, I had several of my students ask where the nearest bookstore was located one day, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then finally one of them said, well, you remember back in March when our author had visited, said that she'd have a new book coming out that day in May, and they remembered that. That's pretty amazing. Not only did we find that the Literacy Festival encouraged our student readers, but it also positively impacted our teachers in school as well. Let's hear from our colleagues about their experiences and the benefits of the Literacy Festival.
Hosting a Literacy Festival is an asset to the school on many different levels. For families, to be able to come face-to-face with an author, and an author that they may have a book in their bookcase at home is very powerful. Also for the children, to be able to have somebody who can be inspirational, for them to be able to hear about the author's background, to be able to hear what inspired them, what gives them their passion, and to be able to the author to tell them how it is that they got to the place that they are right now, can be very inspirational for them and hopefully lead them in different ways throughout their life. Having a literacy festival just seems to plant so many different seeds in everybody's mind. So that's one of the wonderful reasons for having a literacy festival at your school.
One of my newest favorite authors is Leslie Helikowski, who is coming this spring. And I love her books because she takes everyday difficult situations and simplifies them in such a way that even the youngest readers can get that. In my class, we read Fair Cow recently, and Fair Cow is a story about a little cow who's going to the state fair, and her little friend the pig is trying to tell her that to win the competition, it's all about her outer exterior. And at the end of the story, Fair Cow realizes, and Fair Cow sort of knew this all the way along, that it wasn't about what was on the outside, but really what was on the inside that made her a winner. And at the end of the story, she does win the blue ribbon. And my favorite part of that was that the children connected. They really understood the message that was put forth through the book, and I just love the way that she was able to take an everyday situation and simplify it so that even the youngest of our little guys could get that. You know, I think it's so important that people realize that the impact that having an author come to the school has on emergent readers, because we take something that's extremely abstract, meaning an author, and we make it very concrete when we put a face to the name. And when children meet an author for the first time and they see that that's somebody real, somebody like them, I think it starts to result in the fact that they know that maybe I could do that. And recently in my classroom I had a little one who was sitting at our writing center and made a book and said, hey Mrs. Haddad, I'm like Leslie Helikowski, I made a book. And I think that's such a beautiful gift that we can give children, to allow them to see it even in very early age, before they're even reading and writing, that they can do that one day.
Well, my students responded to the authors in a wonderful way. They were engaged. Last year when Stephen Kellogg came to our school, he was right there with him, very animated, and he was able to explain to them how his real life pets became the characters in his book, and how his dog Pinkerton and his cat, when they didn't get along at home, he turned those characters into characters in his book, and the children were able to relate to that, how the dog and the cat didn't get along, just like at times they don't get along with their friends, but then at times they do. So it was really special for them to see him explaining that, and then at the same time he's drawing it, and the children loved to see that. And then in the end, he handed us this beautiful poster that he had drawn of his dog Pinkerton as a gift to our class, which we have hanging in it still today. And when the new class comes in, they ask, "What is this?" So we're able to introduce his books to them and get him on the whiteboard and teach them who the author is, and that he was at our school and he gave us this wonderful gift, and that's something that's priceless for them. So,
how have your students responded to the authors?
My students have been very excited to meet these authors, since they are famous people, and even with Miss Smith, she had worked on movie sets before, which was very interesting to my students. At first they're a little bit nervous when they meet the author, because it is a somewhat famous person that they don't want to ask questions or anything like that. But then about halfway through the day they get really comfortable and realize that it's just another regular person just like them, and it's interesting to see the questions that they're willing to ask, especially having to do with why they chose the characters they did. And with Flipped, my students all want to ask why the book ends the way it does, so I'm looking forward to seeing how Miss Van Dranen explains that to us, or how Miss Smith last year didn't explain why she did the things that she did, because she wanted to leave some mystery behind it. But overall, they enjoy it, and they love the opportunity to get out of their regular classroom and meet a real author.
It provides a personal, up-close, almost one-on-one, right here in our own house, in our media center, experience with a published, renowned author illustrator. It becomes inspirational to those students. It shows them the possibilities of being published, of being a writer. It inspires them in their writing works that they do. The other aspect of the Literacy Festival that is important is that it has a direct effect on the reading capabilities of some of our students via the fact that they've gotten exposed to a whole new kind of literature in a very personal way. They may not enjoy every aspect of the particular author we have that year, but it does kind of spark their interest in the materials that are available to them. We make sure we have some of the books that the authors have written. The teachers use those books in the classroom, either read to them or they encourage them to check them out, so that they are exposed to something in a different way than just picking a book off the shelf. And if you can inspire them, if you can find that little piece that, oh, maybe I want to read this person, it starts that cycle of, well, maybe I want to read another one. And to me, reading is all about getting them interested in something. Then they start reading, and when you start reading, your vocabulary improves, you build your knowledge base, you build a love of learning, and you find out the world out there is pretty big, and it's fun and exciting, and it's a way to access that.
How has the Literacy Festival helped your students grow as readers and writers?
My students have grown as readers and writers through the Literacy Festival because they've had the opportunity to meet with authors who have been published, who relate to them their childhood experiences and how those experiences led them to a life of writing. And also they have shared their interests in different authors, so that has introduced my students to all different authors that they might not normally have known, and that has allowed them to broaden their scope of books that they have read. And it's also just allowed them to see how someone they think is famous is really just another person just like them, and that they could have a career in reading and writing in the same way as that famous author.
Now that you have heard all the benefits of starting your own festival, it's time to learn how you can start one. One of the first things you need to do is to get your administrator on board. When I wanted to begin a literacy festival back in Utah, I knew I had to make sure our principal was interested in the idea as much as we were interested. Thankfully, our administrator was very supportive, and I was able to continue pursuing my dream. We were also blessed with a fantastic group of teachers who were open to trying new things, and after seeing our promo and hearing our enthusiasm for the festival, we were able to get our teachers to buy into the idea. With our administrator and faculty behind us, we were able to focus on the next aspects. In the initial planning stages, I also had to determine what audience I wanted to target in the festival. I know many literacy festivals or literacy fairs are open to adults, but I wanted ours to be a special experience just for the kids. The idea of having an evening encouraging families to enjoy the author experience was very appealing to me as well, but I was determined to keep the daytime presentations just for the students. Another option to consider is whether to invite other schools to participate in the festival experience. When we were in Utah, we were able to have a couple of our authors also work with the high school students at Salt Lake Lutheran High School. And here in Florida, we are also looking for ways to share this great experience with other schools in the Central Florida region. We were fortunate enough to have two smaller Lutheran schools join us for a presentation and had some time for our students to interact with each other. The next step in the process was fundraising. If you have a person on staff who is familiar with grant writing, you could have a person try to procure funds in this way. Author Leslie Helikowski also has a list of grant writing sites on her page. Other fundraising options could include establishing a fundraising event, getting your PTL or other parent support organization to contribute, or solicit businesses who would be willing to sponsor the event. As far as fundraising options, brainstorming is key. Consider all options and look for community interests with which you could utilize. We were also able to raise our funds through a 5K run walk, but considered hosting a bike race, bowling tournaments, readathons, etc. until we settled on the run walk. Once I established the means to raise the funds necessary for the festival, I went about setting a budget. As I mentioned earlier, my goal was to have an author for the preschool through second grade students, one for grades 3 through 5, and another author for the middle school students. I went about my fundraising and budget with this in mind. Before I set a budget, I did a lot of research online and contacted authors and illustrators to see what kinds of fees we would need to raise. When you have an author visit, you also want to figure in expenses for transportation, lodging, and food. Authors network just like we do, so if you take good care of an author and provide them with a wonderful experience, they will pass this along to their writing friends. Another area to consider is that many authors will only do multiple day visits. For a small school with limited funds, this can provide a unique challenge, so I looked into having other schools participate in the author experience. Once I determined a ballpark amount, I set about organizing my committee. All of this information is in a packet that we have prepared for you that can be downloaded, but here are the subcommittees that we created. Currently, our committee consists of publicity, book sales, facilities and equipment, teacher and student enrichment, hospitality and volunteers, and author contracts liaison. When I first started the festival, we also had a subcommittee to specifically help with the branding. We wanted to have a logo that would help authors to identify our festival and also to promote the festival throughout our school family and community. Our first festival was the Grace Literacy Festival. Great readers are created early. And our current logo is Splash. St. Luke's promotes literacy at school and home. In Utah, we also had a subcommittee whose focus was sponsorship and donations. We are blessed in Florida that our PTL funds our literacy festival each year, so we do not have to do our own fundraising.
Once your subcommittees are narrowed down, you want to focus on the tasks you want each group to be responsible for. For example, before you turn things over to your book sales committee, you would need to decide if you're going to do the book sale by yourself or if you're going to go through a bookstore. The first year in Salt Lake, we contacted the publishers ourselves and went through their distribution warehouses. If you go through the publishers, it's a bit more tricky as authors often have multiple publishers they deal with. And when you deal with multiple distributors, it makes it more difficult to keep track of the book sales and so on. Plus, you're paying multiple shipping fees. Another challenge is that you don't always know how many books you'll need to sell, and then you're responsible for shipping the unsold books back. If you don't want to spend a ton of money on shipping unsold books back, be careful how many you choose, and be careful when you go this route. On the plus side, you can generally sell the books for 40% less than a bookstore, so you might be able to subsidize your author fees. Our second year, we went through an independent bookstore. We wanted to support a small local bookstore and found that they were very willing to partner with us. Once we found out what books were available from them, we put together a flyer listing the book titles, prices, and quantity. We also put together a flyer including a synopsis of each book, the targeted age range for the book, and a cover letter from the festival directors. We gave our students the option of a pre-order book sale and a day of book sale. The pre-order book sale takes place before Christmas, so if parents want to give books as Christmas presents, they're able to do so. Whichever method you choose, it's a great feeling to get that many new books into the hands of your students. Since we've been in Florida, we weren't able to find a small local bookseller, so we've worked with Barnes & Noble for our pre-sale and day of sales. The benefit of using them is that once you place an order, you simply need to check and make sure the number of books received matches the order you put in your pre-sale. They take care of the day of sales, so we don't need to supply volunteers or return extra books.
Another important subcommittee is the one dedicated to teacher and student enrichment. We will show you multiple examples of student work from this year's festival. We have found that when the teachers and students are familiar with the author's works, it makes the visit so much more beneficial and enjoyable for all. Many authors require that the students be familiar with at least one of their novels, and some of them have a preference on which book they want the students to read, as their presentations will be based on it. If you can have your students read multiple books by the author, it helps them to make connections to the author's message. Since I want my fellow colleagues to also have a positive experience with the festival, I feel that it is important to provide them with resources to help their students make these connections and generate enthusiasm for the upcoming visit.
Once you've looked at your school calendar and cleared a date with your principal, make sure that you reserve adequate space for your author sessions. Gyms are nice as they hold a lot of people, but acoustically are not very pleasing for speakers. So we look for a nice intimate setting where we wouldn't have to worry about acoustical issues. Identify your author's needs well ahead of time. Most authors have specific items they request to be available during their presentation: microphones, easels, etc. Another surefire way to make your festival a success is to make sure your equipment is ready and working before the author arrives. Another subcommittee is dedicated solely to hospitality and volunteers. As I mentioned earlier, you want to provide the best experience possible for your author, as they do network among themselves. And we've even had authors agree to come to our festival based solely upon recommendations from other authors. The Hospitality Committee is responsible for finding a host or hostess for the author. This is a person who's willing to commit to an all-day affair. The hostess is there to greet the author or illustrator when he or she arrives, and is really their go-to person throughout the day. We've included a sample listing of the duties of the hostess in the downloadable packet. The last subcommittee is Author Contract Liaison. Anita and I take care of this and then report back to the committee, as it's best to have just one or two people at most who are making arrangements with the author so there's less confusion. Once we have found an author and agreed upon the date, fees, number of presentations, etc., then we issue a contract to the author. We have a question here from David about how much an author typically charges. And to be honest with you, it really varies on author. We've had some authors as low as $400, some as high as $5,000. Oftentimes those that are charging a lot really don't want to do them, but if you're willing to pay, they're willing to come. So typically we're looking for an author somewhere between $800 and about $1,500.
Now I'm sure you're wondering how we choose which author to invite to the festival each year. Once we have our committee in place, John and I bring a list of authors that we have researched before our committee for feedback. We also encourage our committee members to submit names of authors before this meeting, as well as after the meeting. As we think about choosing authors, it can be an overwhelming task. Due to the proliferation of children's books these days, your options for authors are bountiful, so we'll share some tips that we use when searching for an author. First of all, we look for books which appeal to kids and ones which exhibit a strong voice throughout. Is the author able to present to a wide range of students? This is especially important in a small school, or if you can only afford to bring in one author. Then you may look to find someone who can span all the grades. Genre is also considered when choosing authors. We feel strongly that kids need to be exposed to numerous genres, so we work hard to find authors who will draw them in and get them hooked. We've had authors who write mysteries, nonfiction, poetry, historical fiction, science, etc. It's great if you can find an up-and-coming author, but we have found it to be helpful if the author has written several books. If the author has only written one book, it may be more challenging to generate enthusiasm and excitement for the visit. If there's more than one piece of work, this allows the kids to continue to be excited about reading once they have found an author they like. It's also helpful to take into account your school population. You want to have books available that they can relate to. As you search for an author, you want to think about reaching both genders. If your author writes more for boys, like Gary Paulson, you may want to look for an author the following year that is more suited to the other gender. My husband and I read numerous children's and young adult books throughout the year, and we are always searching for books that have great literary appeal and match our values. For the younger students, we love to find books that have rhyme, repetition, and beautiful illustrations. For the older students, we look for strong voice, interesting word choice, and if the themes fit our values and beliefs. If the book contains strong characters, both male and female, we want to make sure it provides students with good role models. We also make sure that we read all of the works by the author first. This allows us to preview the content and see if the story and characters' actions match our values and beliefs. We also keep track of the profanity that appears in a story. We don't automatically rule the author out if there's profanity in their work, but we do look at what word choice is used and the frequency of it. Since my husband and I are constantly searching for great books and authors, if we come across an author that piques our interest, we do an internet search and see if the author has a website. We research the author's background and read their bio if available. Unless you've seen an author present at a conference or another festival, one never really knows quite what you are going to get. So we try to look for authors who are former teachers or librarians. If they have or have had these occupations, we feel there's a greater chance that they can relate to the students and work well with them. Some authors will specifically state on their website that they will only work with a specific age range, so you need to be aware of that as well. For example, some authors will not do preschool or will not step foot in a middle school room. Publishers often list authors who visit schools, so you can search for your favorite author and see if he or she is on the list. We also look at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators website, as there's a wealth of information there. Your school librarian may be able to recommend hot book picks. If your school does not have a librarian, you might visit your local library and see if they would recommend any authors. We became friends with the librarian in Norfolk, Nebraska, and we share information about authors, etc., as they bring in 3 authors every summer. Use your connections. You may also network with your fellow Lutheran teachers. After we left Utah, we remained in contact with the teachers there, and we share author info and make recommendations. Vicki Gremmel, co-director of the Plum Creek Literacy Festival in Seward, has also been a great resource. We pass along names of authors that we have had that were dynamic and make really good connections with the kids, and she does the same. Another great place to find authors is by attending conferences and other literacy festivals. You can meet authors and hear them present when you attend conferences by the International Reading Association, at their national, regional, or state reading conferences, and at the National Council of Teachers of English annual conference. There's the Plum Creek Literacy Festival in Seward, and several states like Missouri and Illinois host big literary fairs every year as well. When you attend the conferences, you also get a sense of how well the authors present and if they are able to relate well to children. Once you've found an author who piques your interest, do your homework. Make sure that you read all of the works by that author before you send them a contract. You can even recruit your colleagues or fellow committee members to read books by potential authors and see what they think. This will save you both a lot of headaches. Another important factor is your budget. If the author requires a multiple-day visit, this will require you to find other schools or libraries who might be interested in hosting an author. Being in Lutheran schools, we also want to get the most bang for our buck. Before you get too far down the road, make sure you know how many presentations an author will give in a day or during a half-day visit. If an author will only do 2 sessions a day and charges a higher fee, then they move lower on our list. We want the maximum number of students possible to interact with the author and yet still provide an intimate setting. Our desire is to have an author do at least 3 or 4 presentations a day along with a book signing. There are some authors out there who will even do 5 presentations in a day, but it is rare. Some authors also charge 1 flat fee. This means that their travel, lodging, food, and honorarium are all included in a lump sum. Other authors prefer for you to book the travel arrangements, after you have okayed it with them, of course, and then just provide the food, transportation, and honorarium when they arrive. Don't forget to look for authors among you. You may have a parent or someone in your congregation that has the gift of words. As we mentioned toward the beginning of our presentation, we were blessed to have an author in our former congregation, Elaine Ferguson. And this past year, I had a parent of one of my students who has been published a couple of times. As you are planning, you also need to consider the time frame. Many authors book at least a year or year and a half in advance, if not longer. We booked authors for 2014 and 2012. Another bonus is that authors will often book early at their current price and not the price they will charge a couple of years down the road. After an author has been chosen and you have ironed out all the details with the author, I would highly recommend that you have them sign a contract which lists the price, date, number of sessions, what you will provide as far as food, lodging, meals, etc.
If you have any questions, go ahead and chat those in, and we'll continue on to the next part.
Now we'll show you pictures from different author presentations over the past 5 years. How well you have planned can make or break your author visit. Make sure your bases are covered. As you are in contact with the author, make sure that you have arranged for transportation from the airport to the hotel, from the hotel to the school, and either back to the hotel or to the airport. John and I meet the authors at the airport when they arrive and then take them to their hotel. Some authors are interested in going out for dinner with us, and others have preferred to stay at the hotel, eat, and rest for the following day's adventures. When an author comes to our school, we want to make it a positive and memorable experience for all involved. Signs and bulletin boards are displayed and made welcoming the author. Some years we have had students greet the authors personally as they arrive. As directors of the festival, John and I personally greet them and welcome them to our school. Then I introduce their hostess for the day. Make sure that the equipment and technology is working ahead of time, and then help them get their equipment set up and organized. We also provide breakfast and snacks and beverages of their choice. The hostess introduces the author to each group, unless the author prefers to do it instead. You will need to check this ahead of time. Once you have scheduled your author, make sure that you organize a schedule for their visit. This is made well in advance and approved by the author. Once it has their blessing, it is shared with the staff so they can plan their day. Breaks are provided between sessions with the students. And don't forget to show them where the faculty restroom is located. We provide a menu from a nicer local restaurant and have them choose what they would like for lunch. Our school office manager phones in the order so it is ready by lunchtime. The author has lunch in a quiet place with our hostess. We try to allow an hour for lunch. Some authors prefer to sign books during this time, and others prefer just to simply relax. Then the afternoon sessions occur. We have the host stay near the door, and signs are posted on the outside as we want to limit the disturbances for the author. Students are not allowed to get drinks during the presentations, so we encourage the teachers to make sure bathroom and drink breaks are done beforehand. After all of the sessions are over, we hold an autographing session at the end of the day. If you have multiple days with an author, you may want to have 2 signings, and kids are generally enthused and excited after they have met an author and then want to buy a book or 2. Your signings will also depend on the book distributor and how you do the book sale. At the very end, help the author pack up and provide them with transportation to the hotel or airport. If they wish to partake in an evening meal with you, please make sure the school covers this expense. Some authors also request a stipend.
Are there any questions before we wrap up our presentation today? If not, we have one last video clip we want to show you. This is of Brod Baggart, who's a poet from New Orleans area, Louisiana, and he does a terrific job of getting students energized and excited about poetry. We thought we'd show you this clip so you can see just how the students react and the value of an author visit.
When I stand in front of an audience of children, my goal is to give them an experience of language like they've never experienced it before.
Everybody go in front of you. Worms for breakfast?
I want it to be high-energy entertainment, rich with insights about the craft of writing words and the joy of reading them out loud. In the end, I want children to feel empowered as writers and as readers.
Books are good. Books are great. I want books.
In the very beginning of an assembly, we have the children ask the question, who are you? And we use this as an opportunity to frame the basic challenge of every writer, which is the partnership between the writer and the reader, that the writer can write the words, but the reader has to bring the words to life.
2, 3.
Who are you?
So this is the basic challenge that every writer has. You guys look at that screen and you look at the text and you go, who are you? And as a writer, all I can do is put words on the page. And I have to rely on you guys, the reader, to bring the words to life. So there's a partnership between the writer and the reader. So you guys can look at those words and you can go, who are you? Or you can go, lean forward, go, who are you?
Who are you?
Or you could get a little attitude and you go, who are you?
Who are you?
Well, my name is Brod Baggart, and I'm an author from the city of New Orleans.
Poetry lover is simply a person who loves at least one poem. You can write poetry and you can study poetry, and all those things are fine, and I hope they do. But a poetry lover is a person who loves at least one poem. And if you want to become a poetry lover, you begin by finding at least one poem that you love.
If you want to become a poetry lover, all you got to do is find at least how many? One poem that you love. Everybody get very dramatic. Put your hands like this. How? Make a fist. Can I? Find the poems I love.
Find the poems I love.
So how do you find the poems you love? Finding the poetry that you love is exactly like finding the music that you love. If you want to find the music you love, you play the notes out loud with feeling so that you can hear the music. If you want to find the poems that you love, you say the words out loud with expression so that you can hear the poetry.
Hands on your hips. Grinchy face.
So this is where the fun really comes in. How do you put expression in your voice? Expression in our voice is a function of the expression on our face. Oral eloquence is a function of the expression on our face. The difference between great actors and good actors, great speakers and good speakers, is the expression on our face. Whatever expression is on your face comes out in your voice.
All right, let's vote.
It's a wonderful way to teach children to recite poetry, but more important, it becomes the foundation for successful oral communication, which can make the difference between success or failure in the life of a child. It's a powerful skill for them to learn.
I'm going to work real hard, and I'm going to write my very best. You ready? Here we go. All right. That's not very good.
This is one of the best things I get to do. I get to instill in a powerful way this notion that good writing is rewriting. It's not only okay not to write your best. You should never try to write your best. You're forbidden to try to write your best. Good writing happens after someone relaxes and writes their worst, celebrates successfully writing their very worst, and then begins to rewrite it over and over again, each time making it a little better, never trying to make it good, never trying to make it their best, but eventually not being able to make it any better, and they've achieved their best.
If I tried to write well, I'd be frozen right now, and I couldn't possibly go on. So all I got to do is write my worst. I mean, I don't have to write well? No, write badly. No problem. Now,
When children watch me write, they watch me struggle, they watch me write it over and over again, and at some point, you can almost see it in their eyes. You can see their minds thinking, and they say, I can do that. I could do that. This writing demonstration, the actual modeling of writing, is one of the coolest things I get to do.
Since I have 5 senses make me feel alive. Listen, listen. I can hear giggle noises in my ear.
Once you begin to hear the voice of a writer, then reading books becomes an entirely different experience. It becomes a passionate, powerful, lively experience.
An author visit is a wonderful thing. When children meet real authors, they begin to understand that books are written by real people, and their relationship with the written word changes forever.
I love my work. I get to bring excitement to the world of poetry and the world of books, and I get to do it for thousands of children every year. It's a wonderful way to spend your life.
We have a question here from Stu. When raising funds for a festival, what range of dollars does one shoot for before taking the step and committing to such a fantastic event? Again, when we were in Utah, we decided to raise 2 years, so we had at least $3,000 to $4,000 on hand. Honestly, it depends how close the author is that you're inviting, what their fee is, and then, of course, your transportation fees. I would say there are a lot of good authors out there that you can bring into your school for anywhere from $700 to $1,500 for a day, plus your transportation fees and lodging, meals. So I would say $2,000 would be a comfortable amount if you're going to bring an author in for one day. Again, how many presentations they do depends on the author. There are a lot of authors out there that are starting out, maybe publish 1 or 2 books that you might be able to find that will do 4 presentations in a day for $1,000 to $1,200. With that, if there are no other questions, we certainly want to thank all of you for listening to the webinar. And again, the documents are available at webinars.stlukes-oviedo.org. And there's lots of information there, everything from spreadsheets to sites to look for different authors as far as who might be available and what their fees might be. All of our information on committees and how our committees work, information on possible enrichment ideas you can use with your teachers and students. So we hope that's helpful. If you have any other questions, of course, you can contact us here at St. Luke's directly. Thank you so much and have a blessed day.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the presentation and for the final webinar of this year. Thank you, Concordia University Mequon, for hosting our webinars, and they are also posted on our luthed.org, the school portal, for the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much, and God bless the rest of the year.